about intellectual freedom topics, and it is my pleasure to introduce you to Jim Neal. He is the Vice President for Information Services and University Librarian at the Columbia University in the city of New York, and he is tremendously active worldwide in many areas, including copyright. And I thought it was great. I live in New York. He is based in New York, so it was wonderful to have Jim with us during this month. So I promise you'll have a really interesting episode this time, so stay with us. Jim, please tell us why copyright is relevant for library workers worldwide.
Copyright is a very important part of our work in libraries. In every country in the world, we have laws and legislation which protect those who create information, those who create works. These laws define what can be done with an individual's work, but it is an exclusive right. Those who create a work can decide whether it can be duplicated, whether it can be distributed, whether it can be changed. But thankfully, in most countries in the world, we have a provision that limits the time that copyright is protected. One of our concerns is the amount of time, the number of years that a work is protected. But also, we have certain exceptions and limitations to that copyright, which is very important for the work of libraries. We have certain provisions that allow us to make preservation copies, to share materials through interlibrary loan, to allow our users to come into libraries to make copies. And in some countries in the world, like in the United States, we have general provisions like fair use that don't define in very clear ways or very detailed ways what we can do in libraries. But it does provide a safe harbor, if you will, to carry out the work of education, carry out the work of research. Fair use is sometimes a very complex topic because it's vague, it's ambiguous. That's, in some respects, its advantage. And courts have generally looked at a number of issues to define whether an action represents a fair use. Fair use is not a right, it's a defense. And many countries in the world are looking for ways to build into their copyright laws these types of general provisions. We have to ask ourselves how much of a work we are using. What is the nature of that work? Why are we using that work? And are we undermining the sale of that work? Are we cutting back on the market revenue that an individual will get from their intellectual property? We also know that in the digital environment, things are far more complex, and both individual countries and the World Intellectual Property Organization that tries to develop international standards for copyright have been wrestling over the last decade with the impact of the internet and the impact of digital information, where it's far easier to copy and distribute information to a large number of people across the world. And therefore, in 1996, at the World Intellectual Property Organization, we had a new treaty on copyright that tried to update global copyright to reflect the realities of the digital environment. And then each country around the world was requested to update its copyright laws. In the US, that was the Digital Millennium Copyright Act. And we saw some provisions in the copyright law of this country change to reflect the digital and network realities that we have in many of our library settings. One of the concerns that we need to be sure to be attentive to is the increasing way in which we're acquiring information for our users. We're not simply buying materials and putting on the shelves in our libraries, but very often when we are working with electronic and digital information, we are licensing that content. We are signing a contract between the library and the publisher. Copyright is not contract, and if we sign a contract and it has provisions in that license agreement which are not the same as copyright, contract trumps copyright. We are held to the provisions of the contract. So as more and more of the content that we provide to our users becomes electronic and based on contract, we have to be concerned about the ability to continue to use copyright, and particularly the exceptions and limitations in our law and the provisions of fair use. We also know that information on the internet moves all over the world, and all of the countries in the world have different copyright laws. Now we're seeing more efforts to try to standardize and normalize that through the work of WIPO, but we also know that as information moves globally and crosses borders, it encounters different types of copyright laws. And that's one of the challenges we're facing in a library world which is increasingly international. We also need to be concerned about the increasing ability to share information widely. And so at many of our libraries around the world, we have seen increasing concerns about, particularly from the movie industry and from the music industry, about the large-scale sharing of information without permission and without payment. And therefore, we've seen some pressure in legislation and laws to try to control that type of activity. We also know that our faculty and our students in our high schools, our grade schools, and our colleges and universities around the world want to use curricular information in new ways. The materials that students are asked to view in the classroom and are being asked to do as part of their homework assignments. And we're seeing new laws being considered around the world to make it easier to bring digital content into the classroom and into the online learning environments. The future of the textbook, the future of course reading materials, the use of electronic reserves in a lot of our colleges and universities have raised a number of questions about the future of copyright. The fundamental questions that we're dealing with are how can we be knowledgeable as library workers about the rapid changes taking place in copyright? How can we educate our communities about the importance of copyright, to use the exceptions, but also to respect copyright and not participate in behaviors which abuse copyright? We need to be concerned about how we can advocate and lobby for changes in our national and international laws that allow us to better support our faculty, our students, and our library users in all types of libraries, public, academic, school, and special. We also need to make sure that we model the behaviors in our libraries that we expect from the changes we want in copyright. We want to be sure that we practice in libraries the appropriate procedures and activities that extend copyright but also are respectful of copyright. And when copyright laws are changed, we need to document the impact of those changes on the ability of libraries to serve their users. Copyright is what I call one of those MIGO, my eyes glaze over. It's a very complex and very legal type of aspect of our work, but it's absolutely critical that libraries be knowledgeable, be attentive, and certainly be active on the local, national, and international level to make changes in copyright that reflect the digital environment, but which do not undermine the needs of our users to use and apply information in their work.
Do different types of libraries have different type of concerns?
I think that we share across all types of libraries an interest in some basic principles. The importance of exceptions and limitations for libraries. The importance of fair use as something that we implement and use across all types of libraries. The importance of minimizing the length of time that a work is protected. Certainly as we digitize more of our collections, and those are available over the internet to all types of libraries and their users, we share some common interests and some common concerns. But there also are some distinctive needs that we can see in different types of libraries. Certainly school libraries would be concerned about the ability of their teachers to use materials in the classroom. We would be concerned, particularly in high schools, about the increasing use of social sites and the sharing of music and video information, and the culpability that schools might face if those materials, those copyrighted materials, are not used properly. Certainly in the public environment, we're very concerned that public libraries have the ability to lend their materials and that people have the ability to access and use the increasing amount of information which is being captured electronically. I think particularly in public libraries, we have to be concerned about the growing amount of information that's only available on the web and the vulnerability of that information as it moves around and disappears over time. This type of concern is also shared by academic libraries. Academic libraries have been very involved in what we might call the open access movement. That is, how can we not restrict access to scholarly work, to the products of the research of our students and faculty, but to make it more openly available without barriers of cost, without barriers of technology, and more openly available to readers around the world. So there's common spaces that we come together, but there are also some pretty distinctive issues that are defined within different types of library communities.
What is the role of library associations in educating library workers and perhaps the public at large, let's say our customers, in terms of copyright?
With copyright being such a very complex and very agile topic, it's very important that library associations across the world take responsibility for educating their members about copyright and the changes that are taking place. It's also important that the associations take policy leadership, defining the laws and legislation that we need to better support the work of libraries in their communities. We can have conference programs, we can have policy briefs, we can have advocacy activities in our state capitals, in our national capitals, and certainly on a collective basis. The world's library associations need to be working together in Geneva, in the World Intellectual Property Organization, to make sure that the needs of libraries are represented, the needs of libraries are understood, and the changes that are introduced in global copyright reflect the needs of the library community and those who use libraries.